Okay, welcome to 1,000 Ways to be a Champion for Children. My name is Alan Friesen. My bride, Corolla Friesen, is with me here. We're gonna talk about adverse childhood experiences. I have two very esteemed guests, Dr. Greg Williams joining us from Texas. He's also part of our little Lethbridge committee that we have. Thank you, Greg. Appreciate that. And Cliff Ely is also with us. He's on our Rotary Club, and our Rotary Club has a committee called Champions for Children. And this is where we are trying to increase awareness of adverse childhood experiences, help adult survivors of adverse childhood experiences get the help they need, help be aware of how we might be of value to little people who are going through some real tough times. So Greg is an adult survivor of some very horrendous abuse when he was a young boy, and he had his aunt and uncle, unbeknownst to them, were his saviors, really. They were the ones who kept him alive and said, "Hey, Greg, love to see, thanks for coming over," and that kind of thing. Greg, why don't you kind of talk us through that process, that kind of the healing journey that people who have survived that kind of trauma, kind of the steps you have to go through to get well?
Well, it's similar to what happens when you lose somebody in your life. You know, that roller coaster, those 5 steps of grief that you go through. There's acceptance and all this stuff, and then you have the rebound and all that. But I think for me, going through the amount of trauma that I went through in my life, holding it in probably was the main problem with me. And having a lot of issues that I wasn't comfortable with discussing with anybody. Every time I tried to bring it up, Alan, I immediately shut the door again. And when I did finally discuss it one time, it was a very negative response. And boy, did I not close the door, throw away the key, and thought, hey, I'm never going to talk about this again. And in the meantime, while you try to deal with all that aftermath, and it basically happened right after the abuse stopped, I started processing, wow, if I had only pushed back years before, if I had not only went into a counselor's office at grade school or high school and said, hey, I'm being gang raped by my dad and his friends, what would have happened? So then you start playing the game, the ping pong game mentally, of where you go, okay, this must have been my fault. I deserve this. If I had only, and those kind of questions will just get up into your wheelhouse and really start messing things up. And I still deal with a lot of that what ifs, shame and guilt. I deserve this. I caused it. If I'd only told somebody, and all those questions really haunts me to this day. And because of that, still that filth that I feel on me, I hate to admit this, but I take at least 5 showers a day because I'm never clean enough. I'm very OCD. Before COVID, I was putting the germicide and all the sanitizing lotion on myself all the time. I have OCD where I count steps and things of that order. So I basically just found something in my life that was business oriented that an OCD person can very well succeed at, and that was contract negotiations and paperwork and being absolute with my numbers and my figures, and I'm a pro at that. But the OCD has a lot to do with that, because if I'm 1 penny off, 1 figure off, 1 decimal off, my whole day goes to bonkers. But that's basically it in a nutshell. But there's so many emotions that come through: fear, guilt, shame, filth, embarrassment, are just a few of the things that's in my wheelbarrow that I push around.
Yeah, sorry, Greg. You were saying the first time you tried to tell somebody and it didn't go well, right? You were pretty vulnerable the first time you're trying to express this to somebody and it didn't go well. That would be a pretty damage or pretty hard blow to take, I would have to think. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think I'm a religious person, and I'm not advocating that or promoting that or not promoting that. But I was in a religious school, university, my first year, and here I am at this prestigious private Christian school, and everybody talking about how loving everybody is and how great God is. And my roommate was this Yah Christian, and so I really had a trust of I'm in the right environment to present something like this. And I just came from an emotional. I don't even think I talk about this, or I've never talked about this, but just in the book I touch on it. Came from an emotional church service and a rally of be who you are and be proud of who you are, and decided to tell my roommate, hey, this happened to me, and it was greeted with immediate disgust of pushing back on the chair, go, whoa, 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 I don't want to have anything to do with this, and literally walking out of the room like I was some kind of disease, and, oh, don't get too close to me because you're one of those people. And it really threw me through a loop. And the next day he filed paperwork to become someone else's roommate, and I lost a roommate over it.
Wow.
And I really thought, wow. So that made me question a lot of things.
Sure.
His response, not yours, really. Right? It was where he was at. It was where he was at, not where you were at. Like, he obviously was not mature enough to take that information.
Yeah, that's sure a good way to looking at it now, 40 years later.
But at the
time when I think I had just turned 18 going into my first year of college, that was a major setback. Because a year before that, it stopped. So I was still in that fresh wound stage. And if there was any healing done, believe you me, it took the scab and ripped it off and go, okay, start bleeding again and see if you can get anybody to help you now. Because I thought, oh, no, now I'm on my own. I'm isolated.
Yeah, no, I could sure understand that. Cliff, you got anything you want to add in here? We don't want to leave you out of the conversation, sir.
Well, I was wondering, Greg, do you think your OCD has anything to do, is it related at all to that experience? Make it worse, possibly? Any thoughts on that?
I think I'm OCD because of the abuse, but my OCD is one of those issues of it gives me a sense of control, Cliff, if that makes sense. The only thing that I have, that I've had in my life that I could control, I over control now. Right now you can go to my bedroom here at my home, and my boxer shorts are there, my socks are there, my pants are there, my shirt's ironed for tomorrow. It's all laid out, and I could not have that done and just wake up in the morning and try to find something that would throw me for a complete loop. I used to be to the point, now that I only live a block away from where I work, but when I lived 20 miles away in Houston traffic, I would wake up and literally watch my cell phone or my watch. And if I was a minute off before I got to a certain exit, I would speed to get to that minute. And, I would floor it. And I'm getting better the older I get. And I think I'm chilling out with age, becoming less anal about it. But it is controlling. I do count steps. But when I was in my abuse years in my bedroom, I knew how many cracks were in the ceiling of the house. I knew how many stripes there were in the paneling, how many pleats there was on the drapes, how many slats there were on the window blinds, because as I was laying there, that's how I would offset what was happening to me by focusing on, okay, there's 1, 2, 3, and I would start doing that while I was being abused. So I count. I have a weird mind too, like if I follow somebody home from work and I glance at the license plate, I will remember that license plate for weeks. And I don't know what causes that. But sometimes that's a good thing. But sometimes it's like, why am I thinking of that license plate now when that was a couple of days ago? But in a financial meeting at Baylor, when somebody says, hey, where are we at financially on the budget with maternal fetal medicine income this year? I can go, hey, we're $1.87321 million and we're 17% off or higher. It's like, where did you come up with that? Well, I don't know, but it's there. It's a good thing, but it's also a damning thing. Yeah.
One explanation, and it's just a thought, but so your OCD gives the appearance, and in actual, a lot of your life is very organized, very factual, very right on where it's supposed to be, and that sort of maybe counters the lack of control you had when you were younger. It's
that's a good way to look at it.
Yeah.
It affects relationships in a major way, though, Cliff. I know in my previous marriage, I'm single now, but if we were going to be there at 5 for whatever event, I would be there at 4:30 to make sure I sat in the parking lot a half hour early, so I'm never late. I'm never late. And Alan will probably tell you, hey, I was on this call 30 minutes before waiting. I thought, okay, now I'm 5 minutes, 10 minutes away. I'm going to hit enter the studio. I'm that way about everything. But that does affect relationships because I can't handle, hey, what are we doing tonight? Oh, I don't know. Oh, no. I need to know what we're doing tonight.
Greg,
we're going to do it. Yeah.
Greg, you're just talking about the importance of being early, and Corolla's elbowing me in the side into the ribs and saying, see? So
I always want to be early too. I need to be it's very stressful for me to be late for anything, right? I want to be at the airport. I always want to have time to prepare if I'm not ready for something, right? Like if you go to the airport, I want to be there early so that if something happens, I can prepare for that too.
Yeah, Corolla, I'm there 3 hours early.
Ooh, yeah.
I'm one of those that, I go and I sit at the gate 3 hours early because I don't want anything. An Uber drives me and all that, so it's not even like that. And I live fairly close to the airport, but I'm still, and maybe have you ever asked yourself, why are you that way?
No.
I know why I'm that way, but that's it is. I think back to Cliff.
It's a control thing, I suspect, hey?
It is. It's about control, and there's some pros in that, and some really not so good things. There's a lot of cons in that too.
So
that I try to get over.
Oh, lots of times, right? Like it's hard to let go of that control, right? Like to allow yourself to go 2 hours earlier. That is stressful for you, right?
Yes. And if I'm traveling alone, that's fine. Yeah. And I honestly, for instance, when I go to Vegas or California, I can sit in those airports all day long and just sit and look at people, because that's better than any TV show you ever see. But it does mess up things when you don't want to be so anal about issues. I remember I went to the best Baylor psychiatrist that supposedly was in the country, and his office is just right a block away. And I paid $400 cash for 45-minute sessions, and I did that for about 6 months, every week. Wouldn't take insurance, and here I work at Baylor, but he wanted cash. And about 6 weeks into it, he said, "This is the assignment." Finally, he just, instead of just doing this and going, okay, he finally said, "I got an assignment for it." It's like, about time. I'm into this. $2,400. You tell me something. He said, "Go to the restaurant that you normally go to and order something different." I said, "I can't." He said, "What do you mean?" No. When I go to Chick-fil-A, I order the same thing. When I go to McDonald's, I order the same thing. The thing that drives me nuts is people go to McDonald's and they stand in front of the menu going, it's the same freaking menu they've had for 20 years, but they're going, I wonder what I want. When I go in, I know exactly what I want because I've got the same thing for the last 10 years. When I go to Olive Garden, I get the same thing. And that was a huge, believe it or not, I went to Olive Garden. Instead of getting the 5 cheese ziti, I said, I'm going to order lasagna tonight. And everybody at the table went, what? Yeah, I'm doing what? But it didn't stick. But I know I'm able to do it now. And I try to break out of that a little bit. Every now and then I go, I think I'm going to do something different tonight. That's so abnormal for me. But it's a major speed bump. And it still is in my life.
So in my life, I noticed, and I think because of the uncertainty of my childhood, I'm more attached to furniture. And I remember we had a black and white TV, and Mom and Dad bought a color one, and I cried and cried because I needed that black and white TV, right? Like, I'm very attached to material things because I don't think I had a lot of attachments to people. And so do you feel like maybe that has something to do with it too, right? Like it's a comfort thing, so you know exactly where you stand kind of thing?
I think so. I think I like surrounding myself with things that I know is going to be there. I'm absolute. And I'll go out and buy new journals. I journal all the time. And I'll let that journal sit on the table for a year before I ever mark in it because I don't want to get it dirty. So it's those kind of things. It's really kind of goofy, but once I recognize, I think that's half the battle, and start having conversations like this. Like, this is therapy for me, talking about what's wrong with you. Where are you screwed up at, Greg? Oh, let me tell you. It's like, well, I wonder why I do that. But when I know everybody that's listening tonight, you're not messed up. It's just the way this thing's working, and it has to have different hints and ideas and thoughts to get it to move in a different direction. But there's a comfort zone of being under control.
Yeah.
So now we have to learn Cliff's little idiosyncrasies in this regard. Cliff, what is it with you? You have to order the same thing at Olive Garden every time you go?
No. Well, quite often I'll have the soup and salad, which is pretty nice. But let me tell you of an incident that happened within the last couple of weeks. The Rotary Club, together with the Interact Club, which is a university version of Rotary, Greg, they decided they were going to help the local organization called Streets Alive. And they provide clothing and some warm food to people on the street. And so they were put out a call for used clothing, warm clothing, because we've got cold snap up here right now. And so I decided that I was going to go through my closet and take things out and add it to the pile, which we did. But interestingly enough, I have one of my idiosyncrasies. I'll get something new, but I don't want to wear it out. So I'll wear the old coat for a long time. And so I ended up with some things that were almost new that I haven't been wearing. And I decided to give them away. And now that's totally unreasonable, but that's sort of part of my makeup that no, this is a very nice coat, but I won't wear it. I don't want to wear it out. I wear my old one, you see. Anyway, there you go.
If it makes you feel better, Cliff, I do that as well. I buy something nice. I will only wear it for something super, super special. Yeah. And then, you buy something that isn't that nice, and somehow you feel comfortable wearing it out, right? Because it didn't cost a whole lot of money, and it's not as nice, and I don't know. It's weird.
Yeah, I do the same thing.
Do you? Yeah.
I do the same thing. I have like 80, the last time I counted, 86 suits. And suits and suit jackets, because I'm a clothes nut. I shop every weekend. That's what I'm doing. And I remember in my previous world, my wife came in. She said, "Do you realize you have 76 suits in the closet and 18 suits, jackets. And then she said, and on top of that, you have 60 some pair of pants. I said, no, wait. That means I need 8 more pair of pants to make that 76, so they'll be matched. So I went out and bought more pants.
Just made you aware of your OCD.
Yeah, it's like, hey, wait, something's off. I need to buy more.
That's good.
We're for you. And Cliff, you know this as well. Cliff, by the way, I don't know if you remember this. Cliff has a history in education and in educational administration, like a principal type role, and actually a school division type, headed up a school division. Correct, Cliff? Did I?
Yeah.
Okay.
School superintendent, we call him up here.
School superintendent, exactly. Yeah. I'm surprised you let me call you by your first name and everything, that I don't have to say class superintendent. Anyways, what was I trying to get at here? There are, you saw, Cliff, and Greg, that when little people are having a tough go and they come to school, let's say in disarray, it's really, really hard for them to learn anything, right? Because, they're elevated, they couldn't sleep very much. They heard fists connecting and yelling and whatever else happened in their lives. And they're come to school and they really have a real tough time concentrating, right? And so do you have any your suggestions or your things to kind of regulate, to get calmed down, that you would share with yourself or with others in order to get them to calm down and I'm not saying calm down in terms of settle down, you're being a bad boy. I'm saying, hey, you're elevated, your heart racing, you're thinking everything's a threat. Here's do this to relax a little bit and just kind of center yourself. Do you have any feedback for that way? And Cliff, after Greg, then you answer.
Well,
go ahead, Cliff. Yeah.
I can't think of anything too crucial other than something that's really taken off up here, Greg. But I coffee with some guys on Zoom 3 mornings a week. And 2 of the guys deliver lunches to schools. And Lethbridge isn't a very big city. However, the local soup kitchen makes 1,000 lunches every day that these guys then, together with other fellows, deliver them to the schools. So my point is that I think one thing that helps, and that is food. You know yourself that sometimes if you're upset or whatever, sometimes eating a hamburger or a cookie or something helps to just calm you down a little bit. It helps to relieve the stress. So that would be one little thing. The school lunches, I think, would help a lot. The most important part of the whole thing is a teacher who can recognize when the children are in this category. And unfortunately, some teachers just think the kid is misbehaving or not paying attention or whatever. And that's unfortunate. But I think hopefully we're getting better at that.
Yeah, exactly. Well, although budget constraints on teachers certainly are making it easier for them to have resources either, is it? So
yeah, but again, it's the personality of the teacher. It's the quality of teacher that's important. Resources are important, but they're very much secondary. That's for sure.
Yeah,
I think those that have gone through traumatic events in their life need structure. It provides a sense of security, and it eliminates fear. I think if a teacher just walked in and go, hey, this morning, we normally do math, we're doing science, everybody clear off, time for a quiz, it would put somebody, it's like, whoa, I don't know what to expect next. And it would get that anxiousness back into them, because I think that's one thing that school needs to do for the children in that trauma-informed setting is to recognize having control and structure is probably one of the foundational truths that every kid needs. And believe you me, if you're a parent tonight, your child says, I don't want rules. That's not what they mean. They want rules. They need rules. They will respect you and love you more for rules. You say, oh, I'll just do whatever you want. You're causing them to have anxiety that they don't need to deserve. Same with bedtime. I was adamant about this. When the kids were this age, you go to bed at 9. When you're this age, you go to bed at 9:30. That doesn't mean a minute later. Maybe that's my OCD, but they knew every time this was the time. And it gives them a sense of stability and security. And I'm not in control, but somebody's in control of me. And it's not being an over-demanding parent or teacher. It's being one that can regulate exactly what they need at the time for the betterment of the children. I believe in that.
A regular, consistent type practice. So yeah. Corolla actually had no curfew when she was young. She made up her own curfew.
I made up all my own rules because my dad was working all the time. My mom had problems, and I would make up my own rules. I had a set of rules. I had to be home by a certain time. I had to do this, right? Because I knew that it kept me safe.
Yeah.
Good for you.
Yeah.
I think children need that, especially I think even more so today. I had somebody on my show Sunday night that was, I don't know, Alan, if you want to watch this sometime, but it was on pornography. And I was really concerned. Oh my, I have an hour with this lady that is the most educated and informed person on what pornography is doing to our children. And it's like, oh no, this is going to go south fast because of the subject. But it was just absolutely fascinating. But what the children we're seeing, the children that have free access to their phones and internets are the ones that at 10 years old seeing their first pornography images, and it affects them for the rest of their life. And the parents are just saying, oh, it's your phone. I don't, are you kidding me? When my kids were if they all move back in, and my kids are 20, 28, 29, and 30, if they move back in with me, I would say, as long as you're under my roof, I will look at your phone because if I'm the one paying the bill, I will see the history. I want to know who you're talking to. That's what the kids need. I don't think they want that to have that freedom. And I think, Corolla, you probably gave yourself more guidelines and structure than what your mom and dad ever would have.
Probably.
Yeah. I mean, that's a good thing. Yeah.
We also, like, in terms of tools to regulate, I know that like Bruce Perry or Dr. Gabor Mate or any of those type folks, they often talk about the importance of using your breath as a self-regulation tool, right? And I find it so valuable for me. Corolla studies a lot more than me, but now I've kind of developed my own practice for my breathing. And wow, it's just so getting elevated about something, get something a little, and take a few, all it takes is like 3 or 4 breaths. And I'm like, relaxed. Okay, that's fine. We'll figure it out, so.
Think about this, Alan. For us men, we don't understand this, but it's a neat picture that I was thinking about because I just wrote an ebook today on how to deal with stress and anxiety, and breathing was my number one thing. Think about this. Women are getting ready to deliver an 8-pound human through their canal's body with every muscle and blood vessel popping and ripping as it goes through that channel to be delivered in this world. And their coach is trained to teach them to go, breathe. What? Men, if we were going to pass a watermelon through any orifice in our body, the last thing we would say, breathe. What in the heck are you talking about? Breathing ain't going to help. But breathing has that kind of power to get everything that's going to, and it just puts everything in focus. And that's exactly what a lady in labor needs to have, because you'll focus on the pain instead of that process. And the breathing helps you narrow focus down, and it really works. I used to be one of those who go, it ain't gonna work. Are you kidding? Please. But I'm a big believer in that now. Just go off to the side and take a few of those deep breaths out, like you mentioned. Change the world. And besides that, it's scientifically and neurologically brings more oxygen into those cells in your brain that you need. And it has that effect on our bodies. So it does a lot of good things.
Yeah, I think so too. And I think it also allows you to be in this present moment. If you're focusing on your breathing, you're not thinking about what happened in the past or what tomorrow's going to bring or what's going to happen in an hour. You can just stay right in that breath, and just as long as you can stay there, it's a beautiful thing, right? Yeah. So, I mean, you can't do it all the time, but as you can, it does work. I also had, when you're talking about delivering a child, when Corolla delivered our daughter, Caitlin, we had a male nurse. And first of all, Corolla had all the blankies up, like, covered everything up because she's so shy because it's a male nurse. And didn't last very long when the pain started. The blankets are off and they're just like, get this thing out of me.
Give me the drugs.
Yeah, things kind of changed after that. So, yes.
Fear does that to us. And I think the children that are going through those days of anxiety and fear and to remind themselves to be mindful. And I think it's the teacher's responsibility to maybe do that instead of, we used to be in the day where we used to have a Pledge of Allegiance every day before school. They won't let you do that now because half the people are kneeling. But I think it'd be awesome to start your day off. Say, hey, let's just all breathe for a while. Close your eyes. Let's just breathe and get everything simmered down.
I actually talked to a retired teacher that I know, and I asked him if he knew of any, breathing or meditation type practices. And of course, meditation kind of has a negative connotation for some people, right? But he did know of a school that had done that and had a lot of success. And he was very surprised to go back there a few years later and it was still happening. That's pretty amazing because it's, some people aren't as, maybe contemporary. I don't know. They're worried that it might be some, voodoo stuff or something, right?
We have some weird thoughts. And I was one of those first ones when I hear about yoga, meditation. It's like, oh, no. I believe in God. Well, that has nothing to do with it. Breathing is just good. Let's just get focus. And it's something they can take for the rest of their life.
I listened to a talk. Sorry for interrupting.
No, I wasn't. I'm done.
I listened to a talk and he basically, there's millions of different ways to breathe, right? But he had 3 basic types. And they were water, whiskey, and coffee. And so water is just like water. You can have it anytime. And so it was like just basically, 4 or 5 seconds in, 4 or 5 seconds out, right? And so very regulated, very even. And that's just how you should breathe whenever, all the time. And then he had the whiskey, and the whiskey was kind of a sedative type thing. And so you breathe in, say, for 3 and exhale for 6. And you do that. And so like whiskey, you don't want to do this all the time, right? But if you feel stressed or anxious or something, then you use your whiskey breathing. And then the coffee breathing was, it's invigorating. And so you would breathe in really quick, 20 inhales. Was it inhale? No, 20 exhales, sorry. You would do 20 quick exhales, breathe normal for a few seconds, 20 exhales, breathe normal, and then 20 exhales. And they'd be really fast, like, right? And so that's invigorating, right? And actually, the first time Alan did it, he got super dizzy, right? So anyway, and he said, well, like coffee, that's a stimulant, and you don't want to do it all the time. You want to have, like he said, do it in the morning when you get up. You could do it before you exercise. But, I thought that was very interesting.
I've been thinking about this a lot. And I think a lot of this, when you hear people like Eckhart Tolle talk about the pain body, and you hear people like these life coach type guys who talk about, that you have to resolve this past blocks to your development, right? And I can see this so simple to me that if you're a little person and you get whatever 50,000 messages that you're worthless, you're no value, you're not important, you're a liability. You get those kind of messages that when you're told that as a child, or is expressed to you in physical ways that you're worthless or you're not of value here, if you hold on to that, because you would as a child, you think you caused this, right? That you're the one. If you hold on to that, the rest of your adult life, you're going to have that thing. I am not worthy, right? I am not a good human being. And ultimately, to kind of settle that, to say, hey, adult Greg Williams has no shame, no blame, no liability related to how his father treated him when he was young. Greg was a perfect little child who was treated like this, and then that caused that much pain for that little person, right? So I think it's just kind of like there's emotion, and then there's this trauma related to you being told you're not worthy. Anybody told that they're not worthy. And then if they believe that forever, that changes the course of making. It's way easier if you believe you're of value, if you can love yourself. Let me ask you this question. Cliff, this is for both of you. Can you go look in the mirror and look in the mirror and say, I love you? Can you do that, Greg?
I force myself. It's not easy. And you probably heard me say I don't like to shave in front of the mirror. Still, even though I know I'm a masterpiece, I know I'm valuable, I know I'm helping people, I know it wasn't my fault, but it's still in my gray matter that I'm hideous. It's still there. And in relationships, it affects, because, for instance, if let's just say I'm dating somebody and they were supposed to call me at 9 o'clock. Well, they didn't. They got busy in a meeting or whatever. I never think, oh, they must have got busy or in a meeting, couldn't get to the phone, or one of the kids called or something. I think, what have I done to cause them not to like me anymore? And I automatically jump to that immediately. But yeah, I can say I love you. I can see some good now, but it's a process. It's a road that's really long for me, really long. That's probably one of my biggest. That and sleep are my two biggest hurdles still.
And like, if you think about it, a child who has a normal childhood, who's in a loving family and the parents both love the child, that kind of a thing, what messages do they get? Like every day it's, I love you, you're wonderful, you're special, hugs and kisses and support, like all the time, right? Well, all the time, almost all the time. So the message they have is, I'm valuable, I'm loved. And they go to, like, school as an example, they're relaxed, they believe in their abilities, and school comes easy to them, right? And then you got their classmate 2 rows over who's been told 1,000 times that they're worthless and they're a piece of shit, and they can't learn anything. They're having a tough time, and they look over at the child who's had the optimal type of experience and say, I hate that kid. Why is that kid so good? Why, like, this is, and then you get it where the kid who is the good performer, who's doing well and feels comfortable with themselves and loves themselves, then says, ooh, I can't be good in school because Billy over here is going to hate me if I do, right? Like, it kind of creates kind of a barrier for even the kids that have had a normal childhood to develop as to their optimal, right? Is the way I see it. So
it does. I think parents need to really pump that into the kids, because I have talked to so many people. This is actually, January is Sexual Trafficking Awareness Month. I've had a lot of interviews and workshops with them this month. And I'm hearing from everyone that has been in sexual trafficking, that got caught up in that world and kidnapped literally and taken to Dallas or whatever, made to prostitute their bodies. They were hooked by people that would go up to him and say, man, you look nice today. Boy, I like that sweater. You are hot. And I keep telling parents every time I'm with them, if you don't tell your daughter how beautiful they are, how special they are, how important they are, watch out, because some boy will, and they will go running into their arms immediately and regret that for the rest of your life, because that's how they hook them. They watch the people that are shy and insecure, and all it's going to take is, man, you look beautiful today. And they will attract to that. They will give their number, their address, their name immediately, and then they're automatically groomed. And before you know it, they're on the streets selling themselves for $20 a pop. And it just, we have to affirm their value in the kids, and the teachers need to do that too, parents and teachers.
Yeah, I agree. I agree entirely. Cliff, how about you? You stand in the mirror and say, I love you. You ever done it?
Well, I break out into song.
Do you? What do you sing?
I sing, "Oh Lord, it's hard to be humble."
Hallelujah. I love that, Cliff. Good for you. I do the same thing. As a matter of fact, on my little on my singing show, sometimes I'll say, hey, let's say you're feeling a little less than your perfect self. Here's the song you need to sing. And go stand in front of the mirror if you can. So
I just add, this isn't a complication, but I think a lot of families, rightly so, teach humility. And so that runs a little counter sometimes to you saying, oh, you're wonderful, you're perfect in every way. So there's these two competing aspects. I think it needs to be dealt with carefully. I'd like to throw this in. I thought about this, and I've heard this 20, 30 years ago, but there was a study done, I think it was in the United States, and it was done by, I think, a Lutheran church organization. And I don't know what method they used for the study. I don't know what questions they used, but the conclusion they came up with was that up until about the 60s, children were deemed to be assets in a family. And since the 60s, early 70s possibly, and I'm not sure of the dates, but and it would be a gradual thing, children are now perceived to be liabilities. Now that depends on family and circumstance, but generally speaking, how do you treat an asset? You look after it, you take care of it, you groom it, you're proud of it. How do you treat a liability? You know,
very grudgingly.
I think that enters into this whole topic.
Yeah.
And it's interesting because when I hear that, I kind of think of if you're financially able to have the child, right? Like if you're well enough off, you're more likely to think of your child as an asset and poor. And I grew up in a poor area, and I could see not only myself, but some of my friends who were not considered assets, right? Your liabilities, you're another mouth to feed kind of thing, right?
Yeah. No, it's that's all part of, well, look at our, they say that for a society to maintain itself, you need what, 2.3 or is it 2.1 children per family? I think it's 2.3. Yeah. And we're now down to 1.5 or 1.6, something like that. Mm. So we're not even, children they're a liability in the eyes of too many people.
Yeah.
And I think it's a lot of it because the parents become selfish.
Yes.
It's about them anymore. And then when, God forbid, the divorce, everybody goes through divorces. Then when they divorce, they pick the boyfriend over the children.
Oh, yeah.
And, blood runs till the day you die. Yeah. The boyfriend's going to be gone in a couple of years. And then the kids are just put in a situation where they shouldn't be. Yeah. And that's a good illustration, Cliff. I think that's good research there that they become a liability, and they shouldn't be. They are a treasure.
Oh,
yeah, I agree entirely. Yeah. I agree entirely.
Growing up in a family where you're considered to be a liability.
Yeah. Back to my little thing about that regarding yourself with love kind of a thing. I have a way to kind of sneak up on that. Not everybody can stand in front of the mirror like Cliff and say that he's perfect in every way. Others have problems with that.
Yeah.
So what you could do is this. You start with, I am my favorite human being. I am my favorite human being. So that's not saying you're better than anybody or less than anybody. That's just saying you're your favorite. And why wouldn't you choose yourself first? Because you need to look after yourself before you can be of value to anybody else. And then the second variation is I am and aspire to be my favorite human being. So now it's I am my favorite human being. I accept myself as my favorite human being. I just made that choice. I aspire to be so that my words and deeds are going to reaffirm that I am my favorite human being. And then the last part is I am and aspire to be my favorite human being. And I love that about myself. So you kind of sneak the love in the back door. You love the thought that you believe you're your favorite human being. So for me, this was life-changing. For Carolla, it's like, whatever. But maybe for somebody else who hears it, it might be a value. So, yes.
Another little idea.
Let's hear it.
Most of my career, I would counsel teachers. I'd visit classrooms and evaluate teachers, and quite often you're trying to help someone be a better teacher. And not often, but periodically you'd run into a teacher who just lacked self-esteem. You know, they had the proper preparation and so on, but their performance in the classroom was hindered by their own poor self-esteem. And so I gave this little hint, just a little, most times it was women that were in that category. I said, when you go home tonight, take your lipstick and on the top of your mirror, write, God does not make junk.
Yeah.
And I said, every morning when you get up and you go into the bathroom, look at that. God does not make junk. And that might just give you a little boost for the day.
Yeah, that's a good one. That's a good one. Yeah.
Very good.
Absolutely.
So, Greg, when you first, after you had, when you no longer were being abused, and did you find that it took you a while to figure out that there were things that you were doing or ways that you were that were because of the abuse?
Yeah, I think the mental games that I was playing with myself, and I talk about that several places in the book, and I know shame and guilt was someplace we was going to go tonight, but it was major in me, and I think I'm trying to think the word. Yeah. Yeah, I have a whole thing. It's a chapter in my book that's called The Terrible Twins. And
which book are you looking at, Greg? You got 3, right?
yeah, well, the other 2 haven't come out yet. Shattered by the Darkness.
Okay, Shattered by the Darkness.
Yeah. I talk about this, and I've never read my book online or not. But the first paragraph of this chapter says, there's a set of emotional twins that can reside inside a person's mind. These uninvited guests can take residence inside of your head and stay for way too many years. Who are these unwanted guests? Guilt and shame. I think 2 of the biggest reasons that took me over 35 years to let anyone know that I've been abused was because of those 2 emotions. Guilt and shame doesn't come alone. They always have lots of baggage with them. They carry with them some very heavyweight feelings that keep abuse hidden and secret in the lives of so many abuse victims. And I talk about how I invited them to come into my house to reside as long as they wanted. They had a rent-free stay, but all they were doing was tearing me up inside. And shame and guilt does this, but shame is even more, because shame made me think I'm flawed. I have the mistakes. I deserve this. And to be honest with you, I would look in the mirror, I'm unlovable. And to this day, if people come and want to be associated with me, I'll think, why would you want to go out with me? I'm not worthy of somebody like you. And I still play that game. And shame really is heavy baggage. Yeah. And that has really messed me up a lot in life. And that low self-respect, low self-esteem really does a lot of damage to people. Yeah. And there's a lot of people out there that are carrying that weight.
Definitely. And look at, go ahead.
No, you go ahead.
I was just going to say, and look at your experience when you tried to express this in college, right? To your roommate in college, right? I mean, man, that would it took you a long time to probably try and attempt that again, right after getting that kind of response. That in essence, he said, "Yeah, you are worthless, and I don't want to have nothing to do with you." Right? I'm going to go. You know, that's bizarre, right? But a very immature and very self-centered person. But then they're an 18-year-old person, so that takes time.
You know, in relationships, it really messes with you, because I always thought I had to perform to be lovable. So when I had a relationship, or even a marriage, it was like I have to do something every day to merit my worth of you loving me, instead of me just being me.
Right.
I can't imagine anybody loving me for me. It must be something that I can do for you. So I was always trying to put out more and more and more, and buy, and over, instead of just being, hey, this is me.
Yeah.
And there's freedom there now. Hey, if you love me, you love me. If you don't, you don't. But this is me. But it took me a long time to get there. If I was as good looking as Cliff and perfect in every way, I wouldn't have that problem.
If we could all only subscribe to be Cliff, problem solved. Well, maybe Cliff, we're gonna have to do a recording of you singing in the mirror that you're perfect in every way. We'll put that out on YouTube, get a whole bunch of people to watch it.
You could be the choir.
There's a top 10 single right there.
Yeah.
That's funny. Yeah.
And I guess one thing that I'm feeling about that too is that as someone who has had trauma in their life, they need someone, or they need to recognize that, because I think that's what happens is a lot of, like, I know for myself, I didn't recognize that who sometimes I was that I didn't like was that person that was coming from the trauma when I was younger, right? And so I really feel in this whole journey that that's a big thing, to be able to recognize that some of that maybe comes from those feelings of shame. And I think unworthiness for me is your shame. Like I have the same definition for unworthiness as you have for shame, but that you recognize that this is something that's happened to you, and so you have these feelings that aren't right, but they're there, and you need to find a way to neutralize them.
And how many years did I blow by not telling the women that was in my life, and even friends in my life, that every person that's walked out of my life and left me is my fault, not theirs, because I wasn't really honest and open. If I told them up front, now it's a different world. Anybody gets involved with me now, they know, because I tell everybody everything, but back then it was like I'm trying to pretend to be, and pretend never works. And authenticity is the only way that's going to make a relationship work, real and honesty. And I never had that. So it's not their fault. It was all mine that they all failed.
But it is and it isn't, because our society is, when we were young, this was not something that was spoken about, right?
No.
So, society is different now. So had we known maybe back then what we know now, it might have been different, right? So I wouldn't say the blame is yours, Greg. I would say, it was society's blame, right? Because we weren't allowed to talk about that. And people were, we were treated negatively. The guy that, I suffered a bit of abuse from, years later, when I was about 19, 20, she wanted to do a Tupperware party at our house. And so she came over and prepared the Tupperware party. And when the abuse happened, I was probably about 11 or 12, right? And so we're sitting waiting for everybody to come. And she casually says, I knew what you girls were doing down there, that you were trying to steal my husband. And honestly, I would have kicked her out of the house if people wouldn't have started showing up. But, that's what the mentality was, right? You were the fault. You were the person that was at blame, not the person who was the abuser.
Right. Yeah.
Well, Kelly Bennis was on last show, and she was talking about when she came out and started talking about her grandfather abusing her, that people would say, oh, well, he's a pretty handsome man. And somehow that she had initiated, like her 4-year-old Kelly has initiated sexual contact with her grandpa. Like, how does that make any sense, right? By the way, Kelly is working on a thing to release shame, a program to release shame that she is going to come back with. It wasn't quite done yet, but she's working on it, and she's going to come back with that at a subsequent episode. So
That sounds interesting.
yeah, it should be really good. I'm looking forward to it. So yeah. Yes. Anything else we want to talk about? Oh, I mentioned to you about Michael A. Singer, and you said I thought I read one of his books. Man, Corolla showed me this guy, and I've been kind of watching him on YouTube and learning from him. He's a real kind of a little bit of a hippie kind of a guy, but
Yeah.
He wrote The Untethered Soul as one of his books. I can't think of the other ones, but
anyways, he talks about the Samskara, and the Samskara is a yogi thing about where all of these negative emotions get trapped in your psyche, and they're held there by shame, and you have to release them. And he kind of talks about it being a fairly spiritual process, not easy, but here's the steps. You do these things and you can release this from your life, right? That these are no longer going to be a stumbling block. You can change these into a stepping stone kind of a thing, right?
he actually talks a little bit about doing it slowly, like maybe there's as you're driving behind somebody who's driving super slow, and you find some way to make that a positive rather than a negative, so that you start to practice doing that, because it's going to, then it'll be easier to do the big stuff once you've kind of conquered some of the smaller stuff.
Yeah. I typed in his name and then hit images, and I got this 20 untethered conscious themes from the Untethered Soul. And these lines, these comments, these sentences are really good. And there's a couple that's go, oh, okay, well, he must have been smoking something when he came up with it. But the majority of these are like, this is really deep. You have to awaken the nature of yourself, and you have to look at positives and not focus, because what you focus on is where your energy goes. This works that way.
Yeah.
And,
like buying a yellow truck.
Yeah, I want to read more about him, but I just found that it's like, wow, these are deep. This is good stuff.
I was thinking when you're chatting about your relationships in the past, and you weren't, you didn't want to reveal your past, and then that kind of compounded your, made your relationship not work out, right? Because you didn't want to reveal your authenticity, because you were concerned what people would think, but in not revealing your authenticity, and that's why people don't do it, because they're worried what people think, then you kind of live not your true self.
Well, they didn't understand him, right?
Right.
Like they didn't understand what was happening for him.
Yeah. So then if they would have known that, maybe that would have changed. If there was a person who was willing to be in that relationship knowing that, perhaps that would have changed how the whole thing played out, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I mean, that's the whole thing too, in terms of if somebody, your roommate when you were 18 years old, like pooched it big time there. If that guy was in school because he was going to be a preacher or something, he's not going to be much of a preacher. I can assure you that. But anyways, if that would have been reversed, and it would have been somebody who said, wow, Greg, that must have been so hard on you. I feel sorry for you that you had to go through that as a little person. Obviously, it wasn't your fault, not in any way. Obviously, you have no shame that this should mean. And I thank you very much for being brave enough to share that with me. And can I have a hug? That kind of a thing. That would have changed the whole path. It would have
different world. And I for instance, if I use this now when I counsel people, and if Cliff and I were having a discussion, and Cliff was telling me something that was so traumatic to him in his life, and so intimate, and so deep and dark and emotional, I make sure I leave that counseling session by saying, Cliff, I feel closer to you now than what I ever have, because you have allowed me to go on a journey with you that you have let very few people go on. I'm a better friend to you. I love you more. I appreciate you more, and I'm closer to you than what I ever have been. Instead of them thinking, oh, well, he had that reaction, I'm going to stay away from you. I'm going to put a fence up from you. You're strange. Your experiences makes you different. I make sure I spend a few extra moments saying, man, I appreciate you more. We're closer friends. And even if they tell me they killed somebody in the middle of the week last week or 10 years ago, I still tell them I'm closer to you now because you let me walk a little bit farther down the road than what you ever have before. Thank you for that.
Yeah.
And I appreciate that. I'm closer to you. And I think that's important because if there's any reaction of, oh my, immediately those counseling sessions are over and I just lost all impact that I would ever make on them. And I have to really, that the body language, and even as a parent, those reactions, those gasps, those things that I utter back are very important because they'll never tell you anything again if you become critical of them.
You bet. So, like the take home here, we're just wrapping up here, but the take home is if you get into a situation where a person, human being, little or small, little or big, reveals that to you, man, if you can just be very calm, breathe with them, relax with them, and say, thank you so much for sharing that. I realize how brave you had to be to do that. And I want to be here to help you. How can I help you? Right. So.
And non-judgmental.
Not judgmental. Exactly.
Judgmentalism needs to go. We need to take that to the toilet and flush. It just doesn't work today. It's never worked. But today, especially in 2021, we just can't judge. We need to stay away from that whole arena anymore and be very specifically anti-judgmental. It doesn't mean you have to agree with everything, but you don't judge it. That's not
well said. Hey, Dr. Greg Williams, we appreciate and value you. Cliff, you don't need any support from us because you're already perfect in every way, but we still like and appreciate you too. Let's wrap her up for tonight and keep yourself well. And thanks very much.
Anytime. It's a pleasure. Thank you.
Good night. Good night.